collaboration this year with CJ? Where do you feel like it's even gone further than last year in terms of familiarity, speaking the same language, all those things?
Yeah, I'd say it's come a long way. Most of that was done last year. As far as the work put in, it's like every relationship. It takes time. It takes work. It takes time to get on the same page, to build that to a point where you just irrevocably trust each other in all regards. And we've always kind of seen the game as far as football the same way. But getting to the point where we understood we were seeing the game the same way, there was a lot of work that we put into that last year. And then by the time we got to the second half of the season, we both felt pretty comfortable that we were there, and now we just continue growing in that regard.
At what point did you feel most comfortable not having a fullback on your roster, and how does that change your approach?
Yeah, that really has been the exact same all the way through my time here. We're going to do everything we can to put our offense and our people in the best spots to do what they can do. And sometimes that's going to be 11 personnel. A few times last year we went 10 personnel. That can be 21, that can be 12. So it's more so, how we want to construct the roster with D'Amico and with Nick and what they think is best for the team. And then, we like I've said already, we got enough ammunition. Like, no matter what, we feel like we can make it all work. We can attack a defense any way we want. So as far as like the fullback specifically, that's never been a requirement. That's something that we'll use if we have available, but we're going to use everything we can.
CJ's talked about having real ownership of the offense, the quarterback room. Do you feel similarly about the receiver room with Nico and Tank and another year in your system?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that you're around it a year and you just are used to the verbiage. You're used to you don't have to break the huddle and think about a formation before you go line up. It's ingrained. You've heard it a million times, and you can just go where you're supposed to go. And now you're thinking about the concept. You're thinking about the leverage a corner could be on. You're thinking about the shell they could give you in the run game. You just go beyond, even the starting point, the foundation. That's really what a lot of camp was, re-ingraining the foundation faster than last year so that we can keep growing beyond that. And receivers, you see it for sure. I think we saw that in the preseason, but you really see it all the way across the entire offense.
As you've gotten to know Diggs and worked with him over these last couple of months, what has really stood out to you about him? What do you like best about your interactions with him?
I really like his personality. He's I've said it before, he's one of us. I was pretty quick to see that once he was here. I was talking with him. He was around the guys. The fact that he was voted captain, I think shows that he's one of us. They respect him. They appreciate how much he works, and he cares a lot. He's going to do everything he can to prepare himself for game day to make sure he's in the best spot he could be to go and perform. And he's ultra competitive. That's one thing. Really, all of the guys we have here right now, that stands out. CJ is an ultra competitive guy. Steph, ultra competitive. Nico, Tank, Joe, they're all just incredibly competitive to where, if at any point, any snap, they lose, that's not good enough. And that's how we approach it.
Yesterday, D'Amico said the thing that he wanted to work on most was communicating with his assistant coaches. What's y'all's dynamic like this year compared to when y'all first started working together? And you personally, interviewing for head coaching jobs, do you kind of find yourself looking at how, I don't know, maybe back to Shanahan and D'Amico handle it and kind of take that information in for the possibility of one day you being one?
I'll start with the last question and I'll go back to the first. If I forget, just remind me. Really, that was more like when I actually had to get into the head coach interview, like when I was in the cycle of going through it, in particular after our season had unfortunately ended, and then I was in the second interview world. There's a lot of time of reflection, your experiences help shape you. So time under Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, and then here with D'Amico, they all did it a little different. And they all had things that they were exceptional at, and finding the pieces that kind of shape who you are and what you believe, and then figuring out how you want to incorporate that and going through that process was really something that, I spent last off season going over. I couldn't even tell you. I'd have to, at this point, look at my notes to see what those are. It feels so long ago, But then, what's that?
Put it in the phone here. You're still handwritten. Okay.
Handwritten on an iPad. So is that a combo? Can we take that?
That works.
Yeah. And then the first part, like D'Amico talked about communicating with his assistants. Like for me and him in particular, it was very easy. We already had a relationship. We were very close to each other in San Francisco. We're friends, not just fellow coworkers. So me popping into his office, it was probably to the point where he was like, man, someone get this guy out of here. Sometimes, like, I'd pop in and talk about anything, whether it was football, what we might think on offense, how we're trying to approach a game this week, what he thinks, things he sees on film that maybe we can expose, all the way to life, kids, things like that. So that was very easy for me and him. I think as you get to a new spot as a head coach, and you're around staff that is not as familiar with you, it can be hard sometimes to go out of your way and connect with everybody. And that's one thing, it is noticeable how he's done. He's made sure, like guys, don't be scared of my office just because it says D'Amico Ryan's on it, And I've seen a lot more people than just me or some guys he was familiar with last year pop in and talk to him and have similar conversations that I have with him. You could tell he's making an emphasis of it, and that's important all the way. We see that. I know I'm getting long-winded, but like that's across the team. I believe that strongly with our offensive players. Kind of the door's always open approach. But there's times like even I don't really have much to say to Nico, but I want to call him in the office just to hang out and kick it for a minute, just so we could keep building and growing that relationship. That's really core to what the Houston Texans are, and seeing that grow and flourish all the way across the organization has been fun.
Bobby, in Ohio, you said that what you all were doing with CJ was making him go through the progressions. You were taking away his first, second, sometimes third read and making him go to the fourth. As training camp went on, when you all started to dial that back, how much was he able to use that, what you were teaching him? How much did he learn from that?
Yeah, I think he's always been all in on it. He understands how valuable that is as a quarterback to just be able to stay on the field, get to third and manageables, and that's really what it's about. It's my job to get number one as open as possible all the time, but not always going to do that. And when I'm wrong, how right can you make me? Are we wrong? Like, man, I just called a play and we lost 4 yards, or can I call a play and be wrong and we gained 6? And that started towards the end of camp. That happened a lot. He really is bought into staying on rhythm, getting the ball out on time, and really getting it to our playmakers' hands as often as possible. And that's not easy to do. Like, you have to be very deliberate in how you approach every day to go put that into action, and it definitely has grown.
Play calling and strategy standpoint, how much fun is it to work with this group with the flexibility and the personnel you have?
A lot of fun. I don't have much more to give you, man. Like, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of different things you could do. It's almost, you got to make sure you keep it under control. We're keeping it where we go out and we execute.
You've been pretty complimentary of Dalton a couple of times in the offseason and leading up to this season. What's changed for him and maybe even the tight ends with the addition of a guy like Stephon Diggs? Has that adjusted the tight end role with you guys at all?
No, not in my mind. And the reason I would say that is the receiver matchup-wise and pass coverage is pretty clear, especially the guys you're referencing. Like, they're going to make sure they put good coverage defenders on them. Tight ends are always going to be a difficult matchup for a defense. Do we want to treat him like he's a receiver, or do we want to treat him like he's a tight end? And when they treat him like he's a tight end, let's make sure we have someone that can go win in routes. And if they want to treat him like a receiver, let's big body him and let's use skills that other receivers may not necessarily have. So I always think that there's something there that you could take advantage of. And we got a room that's all very different. That's also what's fun. Like, Dalton's a very good separator, route runner, and he has fantastic hands. But then you have Brevin, who's explosive, fast, can move, can even beat DBs with just speed. And then Cade is very consistent and extremely physical. And really all three of them have a purpose, and they can do a lot of different things that you can take advantage of.
We'll close with Kim and Sarge.
A couple things. I know you guys have a great toolbox that's fun to work with. But can you talk
about the run game a little bit and how much different, or if at all, this year you think it'll be, just because of consistency up front and new pieces you added?
Yeah, I'd say consistency-wise, that's a really big thing to me, continuity up front, and I still don't necessarily know through the preseason and camp if we've gotten quite as much continuity with the starting five as we'd love to have so far, but we're getting there in regards to that. I'd say like just scheme-wise, you're always going to grow and evolve with what you have, and we have a starting point of our run game that we believe in and we believe what it does for the rest of our offense. But I think if you would have watched last year, like we changed what we did in the run game. It wasn't the same as it was early on in the year. And every offseason you kind of do a deep dive, a self-study, and you kind of formulate a plan of what you want to do going into the next year. And inevitably this year is going to adjust again as we keep going and just see how everything comes together with a new group. So it's like everything, it's ever evolving, but it is a big emphasis for us. It takes a lot of snaps off protection, takes some snaps off our quarterback, and it can heavily influence, some of the pass game and being able to get explosives.
Bobby, what have you seen on tape as far as that core four that Indianapolis have with Buckner and Stewart starting at the line, and then in the second level with Franklin and Speed?
Yeah, I mean they're really good up front. I mean, really the front seven they can go to work. That's been a big emphasis for us is making sure we're good in the run game. We're taking care of that. We're good in the pass game and protections. That's always going to be an emphasis when we play. I got to be honest with you. I feel like every week I'm up here talking about how good the defensive line in front is. I mean, maybe it's a coordinator syndrome. I don't know, but it always feels that way. Where it's always on your mind. It's always at the forefront. And truthfully, I feel like at this point, like we talk about it ad nauseum all week, and I think everybody kind of sees what we see and understands how we want to approach it.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
What are some things that jump out from last year? What do you see from him when you look at the preseason games?
Yeah, I mean, again, obviously a smaller sample size from last year, but you see enough. Obviously, the athleticism stands out. Go back to obviously our first game and playing him and what that looked like. I think that's probably always the biggest challenge when you have a sort of dual threat quarterback that can move around. Not just the design run game, which is kind of where he got us on last year in our game, but obviously kind of pass game, then getting out and how to rush him and those sort of things. So, I think that's one of our biggest challenges this week for sure.
Matt, for a team that reached second round of the playoffs, y'all made a lot of changes on defense. Did y'all say after the season, okay, we need to do this, and this on defense to get better?
I think that's a holistic approach. I think, last year happened and it's what it was, and if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And so, some of that's out of our hands. Some players had options to do other things and go other places. And, I think it just holistically our job was to sort of put the best team together. And so, and getting credit to Nick and his staff and going through that. And I think I've said this earlier. I appreciate that, again, having been here second year, like the vision of how we want to play and kind of what's required of our players in the defense and the scheme, and then can match up with kind of the guys that we're bringing in that hopefully kind of can enhance those skill sets of the players that we're bringing in. And I'm excited to sort of see that come to fruition on Sunday.
You guys are obviously missing a good piece in Christian Harris. In what ways have you seen Henry To'oTo'o and MJ Kinston kind of step up?
I think Billy Davis being here in that room has done a good job all off season of. And I feel like we've had these questions about switching positions and mixing guys up and changing groups. So like all those guys have had a lot of work at the different spots. And I think, again, it's unfortunate, in Christian's case, but just in general, it's never a matter of, if an injury happens, it's when, so like everyone has to be prepared. Like everyone has to be ready to go in different spots. And then, I think both those guys have done a really good job of taking advantage of their playing opportunities. And, Henry's leaned up a little bit and is moving around a little bit better. And again, Jake's versatility and being able to play in some different roles has been nice to see. So again, excited to see those guys go do it on Sunday.
When you play a guy like AR, it's probably better to not think and react and know what you're doing. Like as a defensive player.
Yeah.
How do you coach? Less thinking, more.
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know if that. I'm not sure I would word it that way, but yeah, I know. Yeah, I would say this. Let me see. Up front, that's somewhat built into like the way we play. Like we don't, particularly our D line. I know that this is going to be. I don't know. Like we ask those guys just not to think. Like we don't want them reading blocks and trying to decipher things. We want them to get off and penetrate and cause disruption. But when you're rushing a quarterback like this. I'll use my phrase. You can't be independent contractors. You have to rush as a unit because you can go win a one-on-one pass rush on one side, and if the guy rushing next to you gets out of his lane, like there's going to be an escape lane. This guy's going to take off and run for 50 yards. So I think there is an element of that, and that's just a style that we play to some extent. But I also think there's got to be some awareness of how you're rushing together. And so there's a little bit more coordination in your rushes. It's not like, hey, Will, just go out and win one-on-one and you're cool. Like, that's it. Like, you can go wherever you want. Like, that, we can't do that this week because if we do, there's going to be escape lanes. And guys inside have to understand how to close some gaps up and dictate where we want them to go and all those sort of things. So I wouldn't say we can just turn our brains off totally and just go. But we want to play fast for sure. So hopefully that part of it shows up.
Robinson and Taylor played together very small amount of snaps. Is there a portion or part of the game where after you've seen some of their offense where you can kind of maybe glean something from the game that you couldn't have
like
available
on Sunday?
Yeah, like on Sunday. Is there like a point in the game where you feel like, hey, we know they're going to do this or they're trying this?
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think Shane's done a really good job of just like his offense is I don't say it is what it is, but like he does a good job. I don't think it changed a ton. When Minshew was in there last year and Taylor missed some time and they had some good backs. Moss had a really good season for him as well. So I don't know that they were like hyper focused on the personnel that was in there. I think their offense was run and they did a really good job of whoever was in there. We talked about injuries just a minute ago, like whoever was in there having production, and they do the same thing. Now I'm sure there's, just like I just talked about, there's stuff that maybe the quarterback does better than the last guy did or vice versa, that maybe you just are calling those type of things more. But I don't think there's going to be like wholesale changes of how they structure their offense. And, Taylor's obviously a really, really good back. I have a lot of respect for him as a runner. And so I think that's another huge challenge for us. But I don't think their scheme changed a ton when they had the other backs in there last year.
Good defensive front seven, especially with Will and Daniil being able to rush the quarterback that they are, will allow a rookie safety like Kalen Bullock to be able to learn on the fly. Yeah, I mean, our rushing coverage always ties together. If we don't rush well and we allow a guy to be back there and just having his time, whoever the quarterback is, I mean, that's going to be tough. I mean, or vice versa. If we can't get sticky in coverage or certain things, or we cut guys loose, then the rush isn't going to matter. So, I would say just in general, that's our philosophy at a foundational level, that our rush and coverage are tied together. And hopefully, part of the reason we put so much emphasis on the D-line and getting off and attacking and disrupting is that it can speed up a clock for some of those guys, for the back-end guys. But sometimes, honestly, it's the other way around. Sometimes the back-end guys have to be a little bit stickier and hold it to force a hitch, or to, maybe it's a disguise or a look that maybe buys you a second. So kind of we go back and forth with that. But whichever kind of is the lead dog in that one, like either we need the coverage to kind of buy us a second in the front, or we need the front to sort of get there and speed the clock up for the back end. So it's not just Kalen, it's all those guys back there. Like that's
you know, I know you don't think of those guys as being sort of one unit, but like that goes hand in hand for sure.
Can you talk about having Aziz and Jimmy Ward on the field at the same time, and what that gives you from a leadership perspective, having both those guys with the history they've had as defense?
Yeah. I answered this question earlier somewhere. I feel like, you know, part of the hardest part of free agency is just knowing the person and knowing you know, like you can watch tape and evaluate and say, oh, I like what this guy does on the field, but when you bring guys in that you have a history with, someone in the building has coached or has been around, and you understand what they're bringing as a leader, as a person, as a character, all those things that are what they're going to add to the culture, it makes those decisions that much easier, takes that unknown piece out of it. And so those two guys, like obviously knowing the history in the scheme, but also knowing who they are as people and how they approach the game and as teammates and all that stuff, it's been cool. And I mean, they're not alone. I think we've actually done a really good job of putting a lot of those type of guys on the team together. So for sure it helps always.
Nico talked about communication with his assistant coaches. For you personally, when you're a defensive coordinator for an established defensive coordinator type of coach, is it different communication with y'all? Like, is it about earning each other's trust? How much more intense is y'all's communication as compared to
me and D'Amico?
Yeah, you and D'Amico.
He's pretty easy to talk to. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, you know, I don't know what the word is. You'd have to ask him from his point of view. Like, you know, obviously we didn't know each other super well last year when I first got here, and just going through that sort of process of getting to know each other. And I feel, you know, and I think the reason that, you know, I'll speak for myself, people kind of pushed us together for this sort of collaboration was like our philosophies align and obviously defensively and just hopefully who we are as people and stuff. So I feel super comfortable with him in those communications now. I think it's a very open. It's actually awkward. We have these new offices upstairs, so they moved us all around, and so my office. If my office door is open, like I can literally I stare into Miko's eyes. Like his office is like right across the hall, and like our doors are aligned perfectly. So like I'll be watching film, and my desk face is this way, and his face is this way. So sometimes we're just kind of like looking right at each other. So it kind of makes me laugh. But yeah, I wouldn't call it intense at all. Like I think it's a very open forum. He's a I mean, you guys have spent whatever time around him. He's a very easy guy to talk to, and I think it's probably just having the year under our belt together. It's probably just sped up I can go in pretty quick and be like, hey, I think of this, or hey, what do you think about this? Or he'll just come to me and say, hey, I want to do it this way, and then that gets disseminated. However, that gets pushed out to the other coaches, or we're all together in the room and everyone's just brainstorming. He's a very collaborative coach from a preparation standpoint, so that helps. He's great, man. I don't. Sometimes different coaches have different styles. He's good. He does a good job. Oh, sure.
Heading into this season, how much has you going up against your own offense on a daily basis prepared you for going into the regular season?
Yeah, again, I would say that's more technique and sort of personal thing than like scheme. Obviously, like schemes are different, and what we're trying to do, what we're seeing from a schematic standpoint, is slightly different. But just being able to compete against good players, day in and day out, and have that back and forth. Like that always just makes you better just in general. So I feel like that part of it, obviously this is a whole different approach, like from a coordinator standpoint and what we're going to see on Sunday, but you just hope that those guys, like in a vacuum, like it could be a different coverage we're playing this week or whatever, but in a vacuum, hey, you're having to cover Nico one-on-one, or you're having to cover Tank or Diggs, or you're going to have to go step up in a hole and stop Joe Mixon or rush LT, like all those things hopefully have honed your skill set just from an individual standpoint better. Now you put that in the context of the scheme that we're trying to play, and hopefully that elevates the whole team. Cool, guys.
Thank you.
Yep.
So week one, a lot of things to be excited and juiced up for. An important note is that even though there may be, like, it was the last opponent we played in the regular season, so there may be familiarity, but week one says it doesn't really matter, and nobody's who they're finally going to be at the end way or midway through the year, them or us. So we've got to really make sure that we're on our details. So the details for us are we got to stop leading tacklers Trevor Denbow. Grant Stewart probably has the highest motor in the NFL. You guys watched him at University of Houston and playing against him the last few years. Like, it's so fun to watch him play and challenging to go against guys like that. We want somebody else making the tackles, not him. So, he's such a challenge. And then getting Ashton Dillon and Dallas Flowers back, adding Anthony Gold, a insanely productive returner. So, week 1, going up to a division game, it's going to be an incredible test to start our season about, how good of a foot can we get off on. So, excited to get things started.
Frank, did you have spent a lot of extra time in the off season, not just worrying what you're going to do about the new rules, but what your opponents might do about the kickoff return, kickoff?
That's a great question. Two-part. First, I couldn't really worry at the genesis of where my thoughts at. I couldn't really worry about what everybody else was going to do. Is, okay, what am I fundamentally going to believe in, and start to distribute that information to our players. It was more about us. And as you watch the preseason and other leagues and did all the homework that you potentially could have, but then as you start to watch the preseason, that's really when the labor started picking up on what we have to defend against as our return unit, or what do we have to cover against as our kickoff unit. So two-part. First was front-loaded with us. The guys went out there in the first phase 2 dropping on air. And then OTAs going against, and man, that didn't work. Let's get that out, and then let's change this technique. So it was really about us to start, and it's evolved a little bit. I do think, though, the final answer to that question is yet to be determined. As we get a quarter way through the season, whatever self-reflection and self-scouting we can do, and then broaden our horizons with what's playing around the league, I think that's going to be an evolving process. So, yes, that and, every preseason kick return. So, and then there's a new rule that just came out that just got added on as the latest owners' meetings about how penalties will be enforced and how the ball can be in the tee. So, a quick synopsis of that is on kick return, if the kickoff team leaves early, you can tack those yards on to the end of your run. Now on kickoff, if the return team left early, you could either take the result of the play or re-kick with no penalty. The only thing is you just move the ball up 5 yards. Now, if we're covering, we tackle them on the 28, we are allowed to tack that 5 yards on to the end result in a negative way to them. So now it's on the 23. So that just came out. That's going to be implemented for week 1. So it's an evolving process from a league, from a team by team, and then my own studies and our back end work. Yes, sir.
So, Frank, given all that, how even more important is communication with your unit, just because of the evolution and the ongoing changes?
Yeah. I've tried to make that at the forefront in the premium about how to operate, putting something new in that's kind of creation along the way. It's new, it's invented new. So asking those guys, how do they feel with that drop technique? Can we actually go and get this assigned player? Can we get over there knowing that the landmarks are restricted with your formation? So that's been at an all-time high, just asking those guys, can we get this done, and how do you fit? So as it continues and we're going against their best players, and then week 1, the best players in the league for Indianapolis, it's gonna continue to evolve. And those are the guys doing it on the grass. I say that a lot. Those are the ones doing it on the grass. So they're the ones that the feedback matters.
Potentially a very dumb question, but
do you know who I am? I ask the dumbest questions of all time. So go ahead.
Are all the domes the same when it comes to special teams? Like, I know there's different factors in outside, but are all the domes the same?
Yeah, I would say yes, minus Jerry World when you can hit the roof, or hit the scoreboard. But Indy, they have the ability to open. So as an example, why it can be different, they can open the roof, they can open just the back end zone window. What's that, the north end? But to our bench's right, or they can open them both. So there's rumors that might be open this weekend, which would be elite because it'd be a perfect Midwest day. But we'll see. So I would say that generally speaking, closed environments they all play the same. We don't have to not be able to punt or kick off a certain direction. If wind is forcing you to do so, or adjust your field goal range. That doesn't happen when we're indoors.
Without giving away strategy or anything, I'm not asking you to do that. But what was the biggest surprises for you now that you have like a small sample size, small body of work of what it looked like? Because I know after the first preseason game, there were guys talking about they were surprised, D'Amico, by how quick the collisions were. Like they said they were trying to avoid collisions. I think Hansen went down and all that. What are the biggest surprises that you didn't envision with these new kickoff rules, if any?
Yeah, I think that again, not to like say what we're doing. I think that just it's not a surprise, but it was just excitement to see who would and how would every other team play. So this isn't like rocket science to or information to distribute, but the Colts block differently than we block in our scheme, and the Saints block differently than the Cardinals block. So if you watch just across the league, he's like, okay, that's what that team's doing. This is what, and it's not going to be their final form, and neither ours. But I think that was more than anything just, hey, what is your approach fundamentally? Pro punt formation across the league. The rules are the same for standardized punt formation, but some teams are outside in, square base, and they shuffle back. We're a narrow pocket kick slide team, so everybody does it their own way, their own flavor. I think that was the most intriguing thing to really look at and study.
Did you make up any drills? I noticed there's different drills. Like, do you go to clinics to figure those out? Do you start brainstorming and say we need to drill here? Because I'm sure you were doing the same drills for your whole career, and now you're doing these different ones. Where do they come from?
That's a great question. I think that literally in the office, I'd be, okay, my assistant Will Burnham, okay, here's the swivel chair, okay, this is the block, and we're just figuring out what can really, and kind of some creation going on, but also the rules of what you're trying to do and create a run lane here, the leverage points, those aren't changing. It's just how you get to them. So just trying to marry what maybe was in the past to what we're doing as we move forward in the future. But there was some creation going on for sure, and there were some drills that were a bag of they were not good during the spring drills or training camp. All right, shelf those, and we'll move on to the next one that works better.
There's been some discussion that these new kickoff rules might make for easier field position and increase in scoring in week one. Do you think that will be the case? What do you think about that theory in general?
Yeah, I do think that's going to be the case. I don't necessarily know if we're going to have crazy amount. I do think there's going to be some swing side returns where you get hammered early, or you allow a return all the way out or whatever. I do think that we'll see some more of those. I just think overall it's going to be an uptick in starting field position. Call it 28-plus yard line. And I think for that reason, some of the touchbacks will come into play. Maybe not every time, but I do think that'll start to come into play with, say there's a lacking coverage, and all right, just give it to them on the 30, so on and so forth. So I think that's not a secret that the scoring will go up when you start up 5 or 6 or 8 yards further. 2.5 first downs, and you're at least in a long field goal range. So,
do you guys have the 28 then tap as a target return line?
That's a good question. I think every week will be different. Every week will be different. How good are they? How good are we? And what do we think we can get to? And then how aggressive or passive do we want to be?
Frank, you've been around John Weeks for a very long time. And that locker room, some of those young men in there were kids when he was coming into the league. What does it say for that a young locker room like that to vote him as a team captain?
Yeah, it's important. It's important to show up daily, do your work, take care of your own stuff first. And I think people like John Weeks have, climbed to the point in the career that they're at by doing that daily. And I'm proud and happy that people around him see that. I think just being a good leader is taking care of yourself first, and John's the epitome of that. So happy for him to be voted a captain. Special teams captain can honor as well. And to me, that's the consummate professional. So I learned just as much from him as anybody else. So it says a lot about what we can be as a team, and hoping it's on the right track.
He ran down how much older he is than you, and the assistant, and he also talked about, he's like, I played 2 years with my head coach.
That's crazy, right? It's crazy. What's funny is the references that, I brought up Ricky Henderson, talking about stealing bases. Don't worry about the long story on it. I brought up Ricky Henderson, and I got just, and Weeks and I are just like, man, nobody knows who Ricky Henderson is. So, yeah.
Do you expect to see any more uptick in trickeration at all across the field?
Yeah, I do. I think just volume of reps also provide opportunity. So since there'll be more returns overall, I think you're going to get some gimmicky stuff, and we got to be on the lookout for that. I mean, just across all 4 phases, the Indianapolis Colts have done that to us numerous amount of times the last few seasons. So just, Shane's Coach Steichen and Coach Brian Mason, those guys have had some of that in their bag, I guess you'd say, for different ways to personnel packages and trying some substitutions and things like that. And we have to be super on it. Communication, details, alignments, exchanges throughout this game to make sure that we play well in this kicking game.
Frank, how much pride do you take in, and do you emphasize to your players that you've been voted #1 in special teams the last 2 years?
Yeah, that's always nice, but honestly, I don't really even look at that. This is 2024. We have a bunch of brand new players that are going to be starting in the core 4 for us week 1, and it'll be different week 2 and different week 15 and 6. So, to me, the mark of a good football team, a good special teams unit, isn't where others rank it. It's, are you ready to win your matchup that game that week and give your team an advantage or an edge in the third phase of the game? And if we could do that weekly and stack that up and crescendo our season upward, I think that that's going to mark a good season. However that shakes out on whatever statistics, that's to be determined by somebody else, not me. I just want to play good football and beat the Colts this week. That's it. See you guys. Thanks.